fam. Hi. This episode is a good one. I got to interview Natasja Pelgrom. She's a highly accomplished business person and space holder for healing. We talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about owning your stage. We talk about the circles that she hosts and holding space in that context. We talk about slowing down and how critical that is. And we talk at length about her experience building her own relationship with psychedelic medicines and that version of healing. So dive into this one. I can't wait to share it with you. Let us know what you think and enjoy.
Melanie Curtis, Jason Maletsky. Big goals, deep work. Love, fear. Being human. Learning to live in alignment with our values. On the path to our full potential. Trust the journey.
Natasja, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So thrilled to have you, honestly. As soon as I kind of saw your stuff, I immediately was like, ooh, this woman. It was like, she does some pretty amazing stuff, and I'm really interested in how she's out in leadership, and obviously like your coaching work, your speaking work, all of that stuff really interests me. We're definitely going to dive into your personal story and this and that, but I kind of want to start with your leadership, like your business experience, because it's that we don't often talk about that on the podcast. And I think it's a cool thing to look at more in depth and see how deeper healing, psychedelic medicines, all these other things then can touch that space as well. So what would you tell us about maybe your business experience now, or where and how you got into that side of your life?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And we already had such a great communication leading up, and I felt like, yeah, this is going to be juicy. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to always go a little bit backwards to give, the audience, viewer, watcher, a bit of an intel and a background information of maybe some answers of why I do the things that I do today.
Yes.
At an age of 45, I'm super happy you're saying those numbers. I'm pretty comfortable with who I am today in that sense. But at the age of 45, I've always, at a very young age, understood that sense of freedom is by having an ability to bring creativity, to produce, to create. That was my sense of freedom. And yes, I've worked in corporate environments. Yes, I was an employee and an employer, both. But I have about more than 20 years of entrepreneurial experience. And my first and foremost line was actually I studied photography. And that's something very, very different that not a lot of people know. But I think everything at the end, and also coming to what I do today, it's about capturing light. But the light will not be shown if you're not able to work really closely with gray and black and dark.
Yeah.
So that metaphor for me is, and I'm definitely an analog girl in a digital world. That's for sure, still am. But leading up, I've always felt this massive creative impulse, inspiration, a wonder, awe, magic. And even in the street photography that I was so passionate about, I could sit for hours and observe and listen and make it into something, and tell a story. So even in the business that I did, which was for many years, I had an agency in the fashion industry, entertainment industry, and in that sense, and also in the events industry. And, I've run events from 35,000 visitors to fashion shows, to everything in between. And even as a representative with an agency for starting up fashion designers, especially in the Netherlands and in Spain. And that led to an entrepreneurial hunger because of what I was doing at the time, which is now, let me see, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And what I was doing at the time was pretty much pioneering, because I wanted to have a platform, a brick and mortar platform, to actually launch and create a stage for rising talent.
Wow,
and I
cool.
couldn't find any partners to do that with. So I always say, and that's still my motto in everything I do, is if I don't see it out there and then I complain and I become grumpy and I go like, meh, 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 like that. And I go like, wow, that's an invitation for me to do it. You know, if there is a need that I have and I don't see anybody doing it, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And just for the reason of the impulse of wanting to create and bring something out there. And I think the key to all of this is, you know, the means. Maybe we were selling jeans, or at some point I had for 5 years my own club, which, you know, at the end of the day, we were selling alcohol. But it was a 5-story building. It had an art platform. It had a shop with a rising talent. We had a gallery. We had live music. So sure, the beer was being sold to actually being able to create impact and meaning and change in the creative scene, you know, in storytelling. So everything that I've always done was always fulfilling a need of seeing an impact in someone else's life.
Yeah.
And, you know, even with the fashion brands, it was all about sustainability, regenerative story behind it, not just fast fashion, you know. So everything had always come to that place. So now weaving it into today in 2012, I really saw that, yes, I developed an entrepreneurial sense from being an operations manager, owning business, doing all of these different things. But what I was also seeing with a lot of the limiting beliefs from my epigenetics and family history, which are all creatives, is nobody's an entrepreneur, money is dirty, and capitalism is boo, right?
Yeah.
So I had to work through a lot of these things, now let alone my spiritual side. And I'm just saying it's spiritual as a very broad sense. Yeah. And I think your audience will understand that I'm not speaking about a religion. I'm speaking about purpose and meaning, right? And just use the umbrella of the word spirituality. That was a hidden aspect for me. I mean, I don't think my environment, it was too hidden. I think people knew and saw parts of that. But to me, it felt like something I had to hide, something I didn't know how to communicate about. I hadn't figured that out, what that meant for me. But I had studied since the age of 14, and I'll say credits to the young girl who was daring in Amsterdam, my first psychedelic experience at 14.
Wow.
So from that moment on, so I'd always studied, you know, coaching, personal development, shamanism, different religions, and that was always part, but there was a hidden part. You know, it wasn't a part that I owned. So going back to what I was sharing in 2012, I had this accumulation of all of these brands and all of these things together in this brick and mortar in this venue, which was called the House Rising. And I was standing there, and, you know, when you're in nightlife and you start at 29 in an environment which is very male dominated in the hospitality business and an events business, you know, being one of the boys, it was an amazing experience. Let me say that. But it also brought me that I stepped over my own boundaries.
Sure.
Right? And that is where you have substance abuse, where when anybody's ever touched nightlife, you know how that goes, you know.
Sure.
And the one thing we know is don't get high on your own supply.
The rule.
The rule, right? And I'm not saying, you know, that could be even drinking every day wine. You know, it's like all of these socially accepted behaviors. And that was 2012 was the moment I had this very deep self-reflective moment where I saw myself, Natasja, you are now I think at a time 33, something like that. You're now this age. Where do you see yourself? And I closed my eyes, and it was a packed venue. It was a very big event. I closed my eyes, middle of the venue, and I closed, where do you see yourself at 40? And I was like, not here. This is not my purpose, because at the end of the day, I am selling beer. I can make the story, and I knew why I was doing it, but that's not it. So I literally, within that day decided, and within a few months I had sold the business. Now I'm saying sold it. Yeah.
A few months?
Yeah, a few months.
That's so fast.
Yeah. I was like, it was in the city center, so it was, and we were pioneering, and it was pretty easy in that sense.
Sure.
But I'm even,
desirable business to purchase.
Yeah, exactly. Just alone for the spot of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Got it.
I want to say sold, but I also want to say I didn't walk away with a big chunk of money. I actually walked away with a massive debt. I'd made some really wrong entrepreneurial choices, investments, and risks that till today I'm still sitting on the burn of it,
Yeah.
And I want to say that because sometimes we have the illusion I walked away and sold business. Oh, now I'm this.
Right. I've exited and now I'm whole and set up for my next idea. Yeah.
Not at all. I stopped a relationship with my partner at the time after 9 years, the same month. It was, everything was like, I had to cut. That was
the burn to the ground moment. One of them probably.
Exactly. So I'll round it up there, but I just wanted to give that context because from working in this field and educating yourself and being able to take the risks you need to take.
Yeah.
There are many all the time you have to do. You have to decide.
Entrepreneurship. Yeah. It's definitely, I'm an entrepreneur 20 years in as well. And I echo that it is a space where you have to be brave, which can sound pretty cliche, but it can feel very, I think, both the yin and yang of freedom and getting to do what you want. You're like, I get to create my life, my business, the creative expressions I put out into the world, the things that I offer for sale, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also the mutual terror of, oh God, it's all on me. And oh no, and how do I make the quote unquote right choices and this and that? I love that. And it's a very educational environment. But one of the things that you shared just now, or you touched on, was your first psychedelic experience and how, and I don't necessarily, you can share as much or as little about that as you like. I would love to hear about it if you can share some specificity. But I'm also curious along with that, why was your spiritual life secret? Like, why did you feel like you couldn't share that? And when and how did you get to the point where you're like, this needs to be something I'm actually seen for in the world? So I feel like that's quite a number of things. So kind of, I guess, pick which one resonates the most.
Yeah, good. I will start with your first question. Well, so I want to put in a little disclaimer because we have maybe different cultures, different upbringings listening also here, and I'm not an advocate that every 14-year-old should do this. That's one.
Got it.
Second, me at 14, I was a very developed, for many different reasons, and very curious child, and always felt very connected to the all of life, the interconnectedness. So at a very young age, I've always searched for kind of an answer. So that was like, what am I seeing? What am I picking? What am I feeling? What am I knowing? Paired with the impulse of wanting to understand why caretakers, family members were dealing with addictions, for example, right? So the combination of both fueled that curiosity. And I still have a very amazing mother, Dutch mother, very freedom-oriented, very open, sexuality and drugs, nothing was really taboo.
Gotcha.
So when I said I want to do this, I went at the time with a boyfriend. We could buy mushrooms with psilocybin in smart shops in Amsterdam. So just, at that time, that's how in the 90s that was, right? And I'd share that with my mom, and I had bought it. It wasn't ceremonial. It was purely recreational.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend and I, we had bought it. We had eaten it in the middle of the street. We went, for those of you of the generation of CDs, we went to a CD store.
Nice.
And we
That's
put
me.
headphones
That's
on.
me.
And we started listening to music. And you know what can happen when you start seeing music. And then I knew like, okay, I need to go home. I'm liking this, but this is also something where we don't have control over.
Right.
Somehow we made it home. We were pretty much at the other side of town. I don't remember how we did that. But so I just want to say that my mom knew at the time, I was informed. It was an informed choice. So we ended up at home, and it was, I will share an anecdote that I still share today with my own retreat participants a lot of the times, and also with people, because it's the very first lesson that psilocybin gave me. And there were more lessons afterwards, because that year catapulted me in a curiosity that I think no, it's not a thing. It's a knowing. I know it is how that went,
Yeah.
So, but the lesson was, we arrived home, I was feeling great, and suddenly I had this nausea, this massive nausea. And I had a little bit of a panic, like, okay, now I really do not have any control of what's happening here. Right. So I said, like, I went to the bathroom in case I wanted to purge or something. So I'm sitting there and above the toilet seat, and there was just this inner dialogue, with our allies going. And I say, wow, I think I'm really, nauseous now. And it literally, the inner dialogue, you have two choices. One, you hold on, or you let go.
Oh my God.
And it's like the simplicity, boom, 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 boom,
Totally. I mean, that's definitely something in my ceremonial healing experiences, whether it's recreational. Recreation, I think, can also be very healing.
100%.
I'm more of an advocate of that after we have some more experience meeting medicine in a healing context. Again, no real judgments, honestly, on that. It's more to say that that's something that resonates for me, where I'm like, respect one of the lessons psilocybin gave me, not in my first experience with it, but kind of midway to where I am today, was always healing. Like it sort of like slapped me on the wrist in a loving way, that I was like, oh, I'm going to just do this for whatever. And it reminded me that anytime I met medicine, it was healing, and that I wanted to bring that frame to it. Whether I was doing it in a recreational sense or not, it was still like that knowing that this is a healing experience for me, whatever might emerge, right? So, as opposed to, dictating that, oh, this has to be fun, or this has to be whatever. So I love that.
And that's where that message really dropped in, and we know having those two choices, and then I was like, okay. Then there was an innate knowing of taking a very deep breath in.
Yeah,
and that very deep breath in was like, okay, yes, I'm here for the ride. I'm saying yes.
Yeah.
And as I said yes, the toilet bowl smiled in my favorite color, which is turquoise. And I was like, you see, when you say yes and you surrender, you see how the world immediately meets you with your favorite things, which, not that the toilet bowl is my favorite thing, but at least the color and the smiling were two beautiful things. So that in itself, and a metaphorical language that these allies teach us in, and are so innate knowing about every single corner of our species, of our being, of what we learn. And so that moment is a moment that still to today, I think it's choice. It's the lesson of choice. And I forgot because you asked me 3 other things
Oh,
woven in,
yeah,
and
that's
I forgot.
okay. No, no worries. I mean,
So I'm like,
sometimes that's how my questions emerge. Is it like, "Oh, wait, I have this thought and this thought and this thought and this thought," because it's, like, so
oh
exciting and
yes,
wonderful.
I remember. I
Yeah.
remember because
Yeah, go ahead.
yes, I remember. I remember what you shared, and I actually do want to name it because I think a lot of people recognize this, and not that I have 100% a clear answer to it either. So I'm a developing human, people.
Yeah. The
What I say
masterpiece,
today, in a
also a
year
work
time, I
in
might not even agree with myself. So that's
Right,
just how it is. Um,
exactly.
but yeah, you asked me about spiritual closet and being in that space, and I think there is. I can touch many different logical things about maybe society, about being a woman, or maybe not having a specific framework or a specific permission, or you know, certain all of these things. But I think at the core of what was actually underneath all of it is we live in a society where logic, metrics, and control are the predominant way of seeing, top to bottom, this is what's value is. And let's say the spiritual or the intuitive or the being, dreaming, feeling is the opposite. It's discarded. And I think what I needed for so many years was a validation of my capacity to be in logic, metric, and control, and maybe even in the doing. So let's call it yin yang for the purpose of it. Like maybe the more action, masculine yang energy. And I'm not talking about gender, I'm talking about elemental qualities. Right. So I think my craving, my limiting beliefs, my wiring wanted so badly to have value, be enough, and be recognized by this quality that I also developed these qualities really well. And the other quality was actually an innate quality that I didn't have to effort. And somewhere when there's no efforting, we discard it more.
Yeah.
When is the last time that each one of us, even listening, watching, that you've done something that was no effort at all for you? That was just joy and inspiration. Did it feel as valuable when you accomplished it, or something you had to go through the mud and, this for, and dark night of the soul for, I conquered that.
Yeah.
That to me is illusion. Not saying that I'm free of that illusion, but that to me is illusion. So I think underneath that being that's part is in the closet because you can't grab it. It's not tangible. And you have to almost stand for a specific framework from a spiritual or maybe a tradition or a way of seeing. And one of the things that I figured out for myself at a very young age is the more I think I know, the less it slips through the fingers. So any framework that I've studied, I actually left quite quickly because I felt I needed to be more fluid than that framework.
Yeah.
I would bump against the belief of the framework.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so helpful. Keep going, please.
Yeah. So the fluidity is something that I only today can really say, oh, this is part of my quality of me leaning into the interconnectedness of all of life, to the way to be as a carrier of specific medicines, as someone that relates to the world. And I say, the other day, I said to a very, very dear friend of mine, I am at a point where I really don't know.
Okay.
And that's really scary because I love your podcast is really beautiful title, because trust the journey.
Yeah.
Something that I pushed myself right now in it, and maybe we'll touch upon it later. But the spiritual closet, I think it has to do with that base. It is based on my own attachment wounding. It is based on where did I need to have recognition. And I think it's not just about a tradition, but it's more about being in the feminine or the yin that I didn't know and I felt I couldn't fully step into because it would have been questioned. And then there is a vulnerability to stand for your truth, and I close it with that. That is really scary.
Yeah.
It really, when you say something out of, this is my faith and my grace, the biggest fear is not belonging or being ridiculed by a group, and if you've had to deal with in your upbringing with being bullied, and I think probably everybody here who's probably attract misfits and creatives.
you misfit
Right?
toys,
I love them. That's totally, then we've had these kind of bullied by society in school situations, constellations, caretaker, whatever that is, right? So I think the fear of not belonging compared into this, and not having the maturity yet to say, I'm okay with not knowing.
Right.
I'm okay
with
not having a frame. I'm okay with, today I pray this way and tomorrow I'll row, and both bring me in a flow state.
I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with not belonging. I'm okay with not getting it right. Those types of things. One of the reasons why I was genuinely excited to talk with you and learn from you is because I see a lot of myself, and it seems like I see a lot of myself in your story, the very type A, super accomplished woman. You may not identify with that, but I see you as a very accomplished woman, you know what I mean, who's done a lot in her life, who doesn't fuck around, who will do things, you know what I mean? You have multitude of businesses, you've contributed in the world in a lot of ways, you're holding space for so many people now. Like, there's so much that you're doing that I was like, wow, I resonate with that. And I was very much curious about the softening of that intensity, and how you have yourself and your personal journey sort of, I don't know if it's a healing for you, it feels like a healing, or whether it was an insight, or the word softening sort of feels very resonant for me as someone who is very capable, powerful, and I don't mean that in a bad sense, right? Those things are things I cherish about myself and really respect and admire when I see in other folks. And for me, I was over-indexed on those things. And I needed really hearty experiences with softening. And that's partly how psychedelic healing came into my life, is that I needed medicines and ceremonies to really help me start to soften those things, those fears that you're sort of pointing to. And so why I point to that is I am really curious about your own healing journey, your personal healing journey of, was there a pain point or a struggle, some kind of suffering that led you to the ceremonial experiences you've had that then I'm sure, I imagine, opened the door to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, I will definitely say that the majority of people that step into this work is because they had an epiphany with the medicines in a way, right? I didn't.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So, I don't know if anybody has seen this little meme of Snoop Dogg going out on stage and thanking himself. I want to take this moment to thank myself.
I want to thank me.
I want to thank me, and why I'm showing up for.
Love it.
And I want to refer to that because, of course, there was a pain point, and and I already alluded a little bit into it by, stepping away from a constellation and an accomplishment that was ego driven.
Right.
And I ended up being in a codependent relationship with my ex-partner. Ended up in codependency with substances. Had really hurt friendships, made the wrong choices, made the wrong financial choices. It was an accumulation. And I could, nobody asked me to change that. I could have continued. I could have, I've actually, once I sold the business, I actually was offered a very, a really good job really important job, like a high paying job. And I knew if I'm going to do that, then I'm done. I'm going to get sick. I could just see the whole trajectory in front of me. And then what I had actually done, and I bless my dear friend at the time, I had asked for a loan from a friend to have like a 6-month window where I didn't need to work, where I could just figure out what am I going to do with my life. And over years, I paid that back, and I could really, like, I had to clean up shit, right? I had to clean up my finances. There's so much you need to do. My household, I needed rest. I was basically in a burnout. But what I actually did do as well was within the month that I had given the keys, I walked to Santiago de Compostela. I don't know if you know the pilgrimage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do.
I didn't go all the way towards the end because my body collapsed because, again, an extreme thing to do.
Yep.
So thank you for saying softening, because in essence, I am very soft. I'm very open. My heart is very, I'm a lover. If I'm an archetype, I would be a lover. I'm also a warrior, but that only needs to come up not so often. And only if we need to go to the underworld. In the majority of time, my essence, my DNA, that lineage is softness. There is love there. So, but going and pushing myself and walking to Santiago after, I literally, my body collapsed. I was exhausted. And at the time, there was a monastery, a Zen Buddhist monastery in Montpellier in the south of France, run by 2 friends of mine, who's a monk and a nun. And nobody was there besides them. And they said, you can come to us. So I sat there and I meditated every day with them. I don't even remember how long I was there. I don't know if it was a week or 5 months. I don't remember. It wasn't 5 months, but I went back to my practice.
Yeah.
I went back to that, what I had curiosity on, because at the age of 18, I was already connected to Zen Buddhism as well. So meditation was a part that I had cultivated over years. And that made it really a good and strong bedding. Yeah. And that's where I started to lean into myself and slowing down. So slowing down was the key. Now, I won't share all of the moments that happened there, but, I had to go back with the practices that I had studied. Walk your talk. I had done neurolinguistic programming training. I had done all these things. So I went back to the trainings that I already had in me, in my system, and went to discover new things to heal myself.
Right.
I went to AA meetings, not because I necessarily was diagnosed with addiction, but I did have addiction tendencies over duration of time, which I thought, just acknowledge it. And I went and sat with a very good friend of mine who was actually there in AA meetings. And I thought that framework was very, very brilliant.
Very cool.
Because it works with the divine in a way, and the third party, and surrendering into that. Mm-hmm. And that framework really spoke to me.
Yeah.
And so that helped, though, all of these things and so many more, and other people that came on my path and helped me out. And I assisted an amazing trainer in a more new age kind of methodology. I assisted a shaman with her workshops. I started assisting people and stepping back into humility, basically. Right? And
well, it sounds like you said yes to a lot of things. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you said yes to a lot of things, but did you also seek these things out, or did they come your way and you said yes, or both?
No, I was seeking them out.
Cool.
It was a combination of both.
Yeah.
But I knew, like I said, the spiritual closet wasn't an option anymore.
Right.
This was going to be my life. And dancing on the bar, I still love it, but it's not my mission.
Right.
I will do it, Melanie, I would love to dance on the bar with you, but,
I mean, for sure, because it's the embodiment of freedom. When it's done with consciousness, it is freeing, healing, beautiful. You know, I think anything when it's done with consciousness is freeing and healing and beautiful, and
Yeah.
all of the good energy, whatever. And I say that, it sounds like a judgment, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like this healing sort of upward energy is notable because, and I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a pro skydiver and I have thousands of skydives and 30 years doing this thing and being in this sport, this community, this activity. And I've had a long-term relationship with that activity to the point where I feel much more mature in my relationship with it, such that when I do it, it is in full choice. And I don't feel like I have to do it. It's not a compulsion anymore. It's not something that I'm doing very unconsciously because I was not able to quiet my mind. You know, it's like this fascinating thing. I'm reading this book right now called Peak Mind, and it's all this neuroscience about how incredibly scientifically backed meditation, mindfulness, quote unquote, is. And again, this is not a new idea, right? We know this. People know this. People have known this for thousands of years. But it's a different thing when we're in a suffering scenario and you're in a life like blow up or change or crisis or massive transition that is really difficult, to go back to what you were saying, the tools in our toolbox, right? Like what keeps us. So I'm almost curious to hear more about like, how did you start to pull the tools out of the toolbox? You know what I mean? For a person, or was that just very natural for you? Like, I'm going to do stuff because I want to take action. Or was it more like I had to really be extracting extra energy to go there for myself? Does that make sense? The sponsor of today's episode is Great Spirit Farm. Yes. Love having Great Spirit Farm with us, and specifically their ayahuasca microdose tincture. It is a natural MAOI antidepressant and anti-anxiety. Great Spirit Farm describes the feeling as a warm hug. It can help you access deep creativity, flow, intuition, and improve vivid dream recall, which actually has totally been my experience.
So what is exactly in the bottle is the ayahuasca vine itself. So this is a tincture extraction, double extraction tincture that contains the Banisteriopsis caapi vine. Now, the particular vine that this has been extracted from has been growing in Florida now for over 25 years. And the ayahuasca vine does not contain DMT, so that makes this tincture 100% legal in all 50 states.
Yeah, Great Spirit Farm recommends starting with 1 to 3 dropperfuls and increasing your dose gradually from there until you feel the effects. There are no known contradictions with antidepressants, and always check with your doctor and only take as directed.
And what's really great about what Great Spirit Farm is doing is they're making sure that 10% of all the sales are returned to the Shipibo tribe, honoring the medicine's indigenous roots with active reciprocity. Now, if you want to try this tincture out for yourself, you can go to the website that is ayadose.com, AYADOSE.com, and you can enter our discount code TTJ10 to get 10% off your order. Again, that's ayadose.com and all caps TTJ10 to get 10% off your order.
Absolutely. And I do believe it's a combination of both. And there is a strong will in that. And of course, a human tendency is we only change, and I'm fascinated about behavioral change and systems change in that sense. But we actually only change when something is to a point that it hurts enough.
Mm-hmm. It's desire based. Like it can't be desire based. It has to be pain based.
Pain based. Yes.
Really.
Yeah. It's because we're wired desire and pleasure.
Yeah. I have seen that in my coaching work over the years as well. But it's also like, it's interesting to hear that because, and I want to hear more about your
Yeah.
coaching work. I want to hear more about the ceremonies that you hold space for.
Yeah.
That also is something I mean, you have so many things I want to ask you questions about.
Thank you.
So that's basically my issue today.
Yeah. But luckily it's desire based, not pain. It's a pain. Well, to come back to, like the medicines and the change, because I will hone it into that, is that, it really took a few years to come to a new baseline.
Yeah.
And healing really takes time because, owning up to your shit, sitting with your shit, and then also the deeply listening to what you can do and cannot do. My nervous system couldn't do a big paying job. I couldn't take that responsibility, right? And I needed to really listen to those things. So there was a need because my system couldn't. And that also meant that I had to cut tie with almost everybody in my life at the time. So
Wow.
the popularity, the it girl, quote unquote, all of that. And there was a handful of people that, were there. Luckily, I've always dabbled in many different groups of people because that's just my interest. So I didn't feel fully alone. But there is an identity that you create in an environment that you have to let go of. And that's the same when you have an identity with a partner, a lover. You create a third party of an identity that you're grieving as well. So there was definitely a dark night of the soul because the last year of that, entrepreneurial journey was the darkest year of my life in terms of the choices I had made.
Right.
And I had to own up to them. I was like, you chose this. This was your behavior. This was not because so-and-so, did this when you were growing up. No, you're now an adult and you chose to do this.
Right. Yeah.
Right. With all the wiring. So that was that kind of process. Now, at the same time, because I have this creative urge, which I shared or in the beginning about, is that when I have an aha, it's like one of my teachers, I studied the Native American Hopi tradition with a beautiful grandmother for a few years. And she said to me, Natasja, if you have a gift and you keep it, you're stealing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So that to me was always like an aha moment, is like, or creativity. And that's something different if like, let's talk about business. If you have an IP, it's okay to have an IP. It doesn't have to be open source. It can be a combination. Let's talk about those two things can coexist.
Yes.
Right? But I'm speaking about an internal creative impulse. And that aha, what is the best thing? And this is a lot of academic people, philosophers, people that I follow that I admire. It always comes down to when they share is if you want to go deeper on a subject, start teaching it.
Yes.
So what I did was I had the aha, I had the limiting belief switch, I had the impulse, I had the insight, I had the soul download, I had the healing thing, and I immediately that aha, I made it into something that I could give away.
Very
so
nice.
I opened up my home and started circles, meditation circles, and first I would plan for 2 days the whole thing and write it all out and sit with my piece of paper holding on for dear life because perfectionism is there.
Yeah.
But great. That's how you start. Nothing wrong. And now I don't even have to think about it. It flows out of me. But that's because you have miles. It's the same for you and in your practices. It's a muscle memory that goes on. It's a flow state you come into.
Yes.
There is because you've done so much. And this is what I've learned from my photography years. One of my teachers was a very well-respected street photographer, and I was an apprentice with him. And he said, and I was just annoyed with school, let's say, because I wanted to immediately learn with him. And then he said, no, you have to know the technical part first, and then you let it go. And this teaching, I've applied it to everything I study. Yes, going into plant medicine, well, not plant medicine, because I serve psilocybin and 5-MeO-DMT, which both are not plant-based, but, going into expanded states of consciousness is go at the pace and understand the framework. I
Yeah.
love connecting the dots. I love my Excel sheets. I love
Yeah.
getting graphics and measuring things. And then recognizing pattern recognition. That's my joy. I love recognizing patterns. So why
Beautiful.
not apply the entrepreneurial aspect of how you would approach a measurement the same as how you can approach your practice, your spiritual process, your plant medicine journeys,
Yeah.
It can come together. One can amplify the other.
No
So,
doubt about
yeah,
it. I'm seeing that, absolutely seeing that in my existence. No question. Which is very cool and exciting from the human potential, human capability, peak performance, flow state, like those like sort of expanded experiential zones. That's one of the things that really interests me about psychedelics as well, is that experience beyond what we so structurally know in this plane of consciousness, and just being our minds being opened to simply what we don't know, so it's that whole, like, there's what we know, there's what we know that we don't know, and then there's what we don't know that we don't know, and that big circle of what we don't know tends to be really, really large. And I think, it's just what are the tools, and whether it's psychedelics or other things that we do, other experiences that we have, conversations with beautiful people that come into our world where we lean in and say yes. I love everything. I'm like, I feel really inspired by what you're sharing because of that stuff, because I'm like, oh yeah, like these things don't have to hold us back, and they can be things that we can work with, but also lean into in a really positive sense. Like the fact that you didn't have an aha with the medicine is unusual to work in that space, right? That is totally unusual. So it's like also, I think, very useful for people to hear that, to go like, oh, if I have an interest or a calling or a curiosity, I can go toward that. And it doesn't have to be some life-altering thing that motivates my action. I can choose into it with curiosity just as much.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be very honest, and I know that's the only way I can be here with all of you, is that I am, at the moment, actually, psychedelics came into my life as a compound or molecule, as a teacher to be a server of. I already had a very strong base of a client base, coaching, organizing workshops, and assisting others, who were teachers in their craft. Right? So, and at that moment, and still today, I still feel the same feeling about it, is it's one of the tools. It's not my purpose, my life is my altar, and on my altar, I have these things I have reverence for.
Yes.
And that's where plant medicines and psychedelics is on my altar, where I have reverence for its sacramental quality, right? And especially, so that when that came into my life, I had other experiences, ceremonially, intentionally, going back to the 14-year-old who did recreationally. By the time actually medicines came on my path, in that sense, I did have intentional settings and I did have that experience, but I didn't feel the calling. Right. Actually, the opposite, because this is what was interesting, is I was getting in my coaching practice, because I had from, client-centered coaching, neurolinguistic programming, and a few other techniques that I was working with, together with shamanism. So I understood, and shamanism, earth-based wisdom, I'm just, calling it like that. And I was naturally combining it per client that was coming in. I was getting people referred to me this is about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 8 years ago, I was getting people referred to me that had a lot of psychedelic experience challenges, especially with ayahuasca and with DMT.
Got it.
Yeah. And because of either the facilitation, the setting, the combination, the lack of preparation, the going out 2 days after and doing alcohol and getting discombobulated, but also even with the settings being all correct. So I also want to say the hype around psychedelics is beautiful, but it is also a hype, and there isn't like this. It isn't only beautiful, it
Right.
really isn't. There is many people that have challenges for a year to 2 years after. And at that time, people were coming on my path that needed integration work.
Right.
And the word integration, I remember Googling it, and there were about 3 people talking about it. MAPS had a list of a few people on their website. And that's because somewhere life, and this is where when you're connected, when you're in your flow, when you're in resonance with what you're doing, life is responding to you and with you, and your teachers will show up. It's up to you if you can create silence enough to recognize what you're being taught. That's your ultimate job. If you want to step on the path of devotion, which I think serving a sacrament is the ultimate path of devotion right now. If you want to step onto it, your main job is getting your vessel so clean. So doing shadow work, doing your own inner work, creating a lot of silence, knowing your biases, knowing your attachment styles, knowing all of this, right? And then having that silence to recognize when things are coming in your path. Now, because I was having coaching clients with integration and I was seeing, let's say, quote unquote, the wrong things, I had formed a judgment. And I had formed a judgment on, again, people are trying to go fast in healing instead of doing the real work. And then, in a city, 3 stories up in a cell, in an attic with so-called shaman with a headpiece on singing Kumbaya, and that's a ceremony, I was like cringing.
Yeah.
Not that I had a massive amount of experience, but it felt to me that wasn't the way. So that's actually how it ended up in my life, was through my partner at the time who had experience. Now, mind you, at that time, psilocybin was now illegal with mushrooms in the Netherlands, right? And now it's with truffles. Truffles is, for those who are listening, is the root, so the body, the mycelium underground, and then the fruit is the mushroom itself. So we have a loophole in Dutch law where the fruit is illegal, but what's underground is legal, and it's seen as food. So we pay 6% tax on it. Wow. So I just want to give, because a lot of people don't understand that difference, right? So at the time, I was also supporting people with integration and coaching and some other work, and supporting these more local people with more underground work with psilocybin. And then because of this integration element that I was providing naturally, I didn't even call it integration. I don't think I was even putting it on my website. I don't even, it was just part of what I was doing.
Right. Helping people make sense of the experiences that they've had, helping them feel supported. I say often that half the time the largest part of, or the thing that is the most healing for me in my ceremonies, is not the ceremony or the medicine, communing with the medicine. It is the talking with my coaches and being seen and safely held and deeply known in whatever the medicine has shown me, whatever insights I'm having. The fact that I can then share them safely into a loving container is wildly transformative. And from that perspective, given you have experience doing a lot of that, Natasja, the coaching, the holding space, I'm genuinely curious about have you seen any common threads of like what helps people the most? I mean, maybe you don't, maybe it's completely divergent, but I'm curious are there common threads among the people that you have worked with of something that's really helped them the most? Because I'm thinking about people listening, like, oh, what are they potentially taking away? Obviously, we learn a lot from just simply our own storytelling, but I'm curious from that more pragmatic view as well.
Yes. Well, there is one thing that is the most boring thing probably that I can say.
Love
Because
it.
it's no whistles, no
Right.
bells.
Not shiny, not sexy.
It's not
Let's hear it.
shiny. But if you do not take time to slow down, stop, and not overschedule, not make too much to-do lists, integration cannot unfold in the way that you are worth it.
Yes.
And why am I saying it in that way? You've dedicated time, finances. You've put yourself in a situation to explore and expand. You've done all of these things. And the one thing that people grapple the most challenged with going back and actually implementing, and it was the cornerstone of integration, is slowing down, stopping, saying no to themselves first, not the world necessarily, but actually allocating space.
Yeah.
Not overscheduling. Because if you don't have that space to reflect and apply self-awareness, to even ask yourself the question, what do I need today? Then it's going to be an experience, and maybe you'll learn some things, but actual behavioral change will need time and a lot of time. You know, I went to Mexico in 2019, and I was there with a Mazatec elder and traditional ceremonies, and there were multiple ceremonies. And there was either extremely beautiful with a lot of downloads and gifts, and excruciatingly soul emotionally painful. And nervous system painful. My nervous system was overly activated and was, and when I went back home, I said to myself, now I need minimum of a year of no taking any medicines. Now, I'm also not someone that is an advocate for a lot of intake. Can you really, I think the most beautiful wisdom you can do, which is the most meaningful, can you really take everything out of that one experience? There is enough of it for a lifetime in there.
Yep.
And I'll lead in a little bit into, this idea that even people that facilitate or serve compounds need to have all of these medicines in their arsenal to then be like, Tarzan, and saying, I've done all of this. But do you know the compound?
Right.
Do you actually know this ally for its fullness of its quality? Because traditionally even, and listen, I'm debunking myself as I'm saying this because I serve two medicines. So, there we go. But traditionally speaking, you commit to one sacrament over a lifetime. That's your devotional practice.
Right.
And I think that's especially with ayahuasca. I'm not an ayahuasca server. I don't have the whole knowledge, but I do know that certain compounds, that's a life choice.
Yeah.
It's a relationship you build. You need to build that relationship because of understanding how to skillfully navigate in expanded states of consciousness. And this is where it goes into skillfully. Because psilocybin will give you illusion and will tell you about your illusion. So for you to fully figure out, which probably will not, and there's maybe only a few that fully understand when you pass through what stage of the medicine. Now, going back before I started serving medicine is I was already naturally going into expanded states of consciousness through other means, through sacred sexuality, through simply drumming, through techniques of the body, of movement, sitting in specific postures, through old Taoistic techniques of putting the body in certain brain waves, which is your alpha brain waves, and going into theta brain waves. All of this are natural ways that will teach you at the level that you're at.
Yeah.
Psychedelics and this is that I think the risk, it's like if I've never been in labor, so I can't share from experience, but if a woman is giving birth and she is pushing at the time where she's not ready, or the fetus is not ready yet to go,
Right.
she'll exhaust herself. And by the time it is actually the push, she can't do it. There will be complications. The same thing goes for this idea of our hero's journey, right? If we start to want to unravel the gifts before we've even dove into the caves of our shadow and accumulated and brought ourselves into deep humility, then you're going to bypass. And this is what I think happens a lot in plant medicine, psychedelic spaces, where there is a natural, innate knowing of our body and our connection to life, that will know when to push, when that transformation needs to happen.
Which
right?
is connected to the surrender that you
absolutely,
mentioned
absolutely.
at the beginning. Yeah.
And that's where it feels to me where how I look at it and how I've approached it since day one is skillfully navigating an expanded state. When a client is coming into your container, they're coming into the free pass of your relationship with that compound. Now, I don't think people fully understand this.
Right.
You're coming in on the door that I've created with that compound.
Right.
So that means that relationship, for me, needs to be very, very truthful. Right? And in integrity. What I find in integrity, my values, right? That's the door you're coming into. And then you're helping someone who has no experience, who has no background, who has no bedding, the majority of people, to skillfully navigate a little bit of themselves in a place of surrender. If, just the compound isn't enough for our Western minds.
I agree.
You need a method. So you need a method of understanding what neurologically happens when people go through transformational space. Now, this is where the difference is between, I'll do in the morning, I'll do some yoga, I'll guide people through some holotropic breath work, get some catharsis going, because then people have the feeling they received something. In the afternoon, we give them psilocybin, and the next day they go home. Doesn't mean that they don't have a beautiful experience. Doesn't mean they haven't received a gift with it. Of course. That's just simply not how I relate to understanding how the nervous system works, how wounding works, how you are responsible to bring in a stewardship quality into this work and educate people instead of, this is my healing, I'm now coming for this is a quick fix. Because the majority of people will not implement half of what they've gotten in that day.
Oh, yeah. What I hear in what you shared there is high respect for transformation, high respect certainly for medicine, high respect for the relationship with the compound that you are connected to in this lifetime or whatever that may be. But that respect is notable. You know what I'm saying? And I like that, just even from a frame of anything that we are called toward. You know what I mean? Anything, whether it is healing with medicine, whether it is doing coaching work, whether it is working with a coach for our own growth, whether it is taking on some goal that we have. And this is something that I'm a huge fan and supporter of Tim Ferriss. He actually really helped me get out and be publicly using my voice in service to deeper healing, psychedelics, and all of those curiosities. Why I bring that up is that this is a sort of, he often does this on his show where he's like, selfishly, I want to ask you X. So for me, I'm like, selfishly, I want to ask you about your keynote speaking, because I've been doing a lot more work in that lane of my work, my contribution, impact, all that stuff, but it's also very much connected for me to my voice and being fully expressed, but also it's connected to being seen in this sort of elevated way. It's something I'm not fully clear. I'm working through it currently. Like, this is a current thing. I'm growing in this way. And I'm basically wondering, what advice would you have for me, who's wanting to grow in that way, because there are other people that I'm sure are listening that maybe that they're not into keynote speaking, but the idea of freeing our voice and being bravely seen as contribution to both self and others in the world, that's something I'm deeply convicted around, even though it is often deeply uncomfortable for me. But like, as I grow and peel those onion layers back, it's still, the calling of it for me still remains, even though there's a lot of difficulty in the process, at least currently for me. So anyway, yeah, like, what do you got for me if you're willing?
Well, and thank you so much for also acknowledging for your audience, and then also here, of course, in our dialogue, your own openness about where you are in your growth.
Yeah,
that's yummy to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Because then you have a truthful conversation happening that goes both ways, right? So, one of the things is what I referred to in the beginning is, those moments when something is really easy and you discard it,
yes,
or something feels really joyful, then you discard it. And I actually came to understanding, because of my hosting and presentation on different platforms and for different organizations and things that I'd done, that it was something that was giving me energy and it wasn't an effort. So this is my personal, I felt like, it's like, it's playing. I felt like playing. So that's my own aha moment with it. And then, of course, yes, the imposter syndrome shows up in different ways. The imposter syndrome showed up when I was asked to actually write a piece in a book, which is called Psychedelics and Psychotherapy. Now, I don't have a PhD. I'm not academic. I grew up in multiple countries, had to learn languages multiple times, dyslexia. There is a lot of fear around expressing in language and writing, but I'm actually not so bad at it, writing, that I discovered along the way. But when I was asked for this book with people that I really admired who invited me into it, I think I went for months in resistance, and it was horrible. It was horrible, this imposter feeling. And I had to work through it, but I'm so grateful I did. Because again, it was part of also understanding, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to just do a sidestep, because I think it's important for the audience to understand. I just spoke about shadow work, and especially for people that are doing any kind of service, with other people, it's important to understand your own. And let's call it my friend Alexander Beiner, who wrote an amazing book, by the way. But he says, him and I, we work together, and he always says, the me that I cannot see. So I think when I say the me that I cannot see, I think everybody goes like, oh yeah, I get it. So when I say shadow work, it's like, ooh, monsters I don't know about, right? So it's the me that I cannot see. And I see that as, let's say, parts of you that are part of a cluster that also protect, and this is from Carl Jung, right, the golden shadow. So let's say that this part of you that is created is part of the protection mechanism of a cluster in our psyche, in our being, in our archetypical language, that actually protects a gift and a talent of yours, right? Now, here comes the interesting point, and I'll refer back to the writing, is when I was in that state of fear, I was also not allowing myself to discover a talent that I have for writing a lot more than I thought.
Yes.
And for many other personal reasons, there were other things attached to that writing, because I come from a family of writers. So, I could never be as good as them. All of those things, right? So, but you see, like, I just want to say, so sometimes our biggest fear are connected to parts of us that are meant as a protection because they served a certain time. And then suddenly they're also protecting the gift. So working through that is so that you can uncover the golden aspect of you or the enlightened part of you. Now, going back to the stage question in keynote, I do not approach anything where I am telling story is a ceremony for me. So my biggest audience was probably about 500 to 700 people. And that was a very significant moment in my life because I discovered that through part of who I am I like co-creating. I like playing together with others.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
And I love building stages, even when I shared about my entrepreneurial past, those are stages for other people to shine. The House of Rising was other people to shine. I'm good at that. But what is a part of that is that I give away my own stage. My stage is mine. Melanie's stage is hers. And you as an audience, your stage is for you.
Yeah.
And you can say, I applaud your stage. Melanie, you go on your stage, but I don't have to share mine. Mine is for me. And what I was doing was I was sharing mine. So what happens is you diminish, and sometimes in some real friendships or business ventures, you actually create a codependent relationship instead of saying, let's amplify each other's stages in this collaboration.
Right.
But I was doing, that's a slightly different nuance of mechanism. So I do two things. I own my stage, and that's like it's work in progress. Yeah. So I say it really easy, but it was a whole work towards that. Why coming from the imposter syndrome to doing that? And then second, I approach it as a ceremony. So when I step on that stage, I do a sacred tobacco purge.
Okay.
I am in prayer. I work with sacred tobacco from Mapacho from Peru. I don't serve it, but I do work on myself with it. I'm not initiated in that, but I do work on myself. And I work with rapé on myself. I do prayer with it on myself. I make an offering wherever I am, or what country or what land, the surroundings. I was at a university. I pick a tree that I find most beautiful, and I go and I make an offering before I speak.
Well, I
ask for guidance, and I step out of my own way. And then the third component that I want to share is the one thing, and I'm not saying that I think that's you, Melanie. I'm just saying in general, what I have found is the moment we make it about us is when we get entangled. So the trick is your why needs to be, or your hook of your story needs to be about what you're serving.
Yeah.
And I'm just the vehicle. And this is one of the things that I've learned from Theta healing, which is also combined a little bit of NLP and other techniques, but also with AA is the third component, something that is bigger than you. And when I lean into something that is bigger than me, it's not about me anymore. I'm of service.
Yes.
And then the story that I'm sharing on that stage is as a servant. It's about servant leadership.
Absolutely.
So that's my invitation more than anything, is to lean into servant leadership.
Yeah. I love the notion that as a vehicle, that you are a vehicle for what
you're a vehicle. Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to frame it.
Yeah. So
on please go. You please go.
Sorry. No, it's when the imposter shows up, it's because it's me. It's the self-centered part, and which is fine. That's our egoic structure. It's something we consistently are building relationship out of in with.
Yes,
right? Nothing wrong with that. But I have noticed that I get more entangled when I make this thing more about me instead of the other.
And that's, I also love the piece about owning my stage. You know what I mean? Like being given permission by just someone else. like, again, I say this often with clients, and I see it in my own experience too, growing as a person, caring about things, yada, 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 is that the more credible voices I can have supporting me to do the things that seem difficult for me, or to open an insight around the things that are holding me back. And even just the notion of owning my stage, which seems almost weird that that would be useful for me, because I've been a personal brand for 20 years. I've been out in the world as me for entrepreneurially, et cetera, creatively for a long, long time. But to your point back when you shared it, I don't even know when, about humility, is that I feel a genuine humility that okay, who cares that I've been doing this 20 years? I'm in something new for me. And that has that beautiful humility to it, where the coaching of own your stage is really genuinely useful for me. You know what I mean? And I think that's a wonderful thing, because I feel like so many people are held back because they might reach a certain level of expertise or notoriety or whatever, and then that closes doors for them because of that fear of looking stupid, or the fear of messing it up, or the fear of impacting the quote unquote success they've already reached. And so I feel that in my own experience recently. And so anyway, I really appreciate your share, because I just feel like hearing it from other folks that I respect and admire helps me. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for everybody has their own way, like some people are just, if it's almost like, oh, that feels so easy, but it doesn't mean there's a craft. I love watching stand-up comedy.
Me too.
And besides, of course, I love laughing.
So
right?
hard. Have you ever done stand-up comedy?
No, I've never. I mean, I think I'm naturally funny, but that's it.
I'm naturally funny, people.
You see how I owned my stage?
I love it. I love it.
No, joking. But it's, I think there is such a small group of people that can do stand-up comedy in a way that it feels so natural, and you're actually sitting right next to them. And that craft, to me, it's like I eat it up, because that's real talent. And that's real talent in a way where it's like, again, you have to know the technique, and then you release it, and then you let it go, right? So and that's true. Like these kind of things. And for me, it's also like I watch people that I find inspiration in, and just listen to them, and I go like, why do I find this inspiring? What is it that's happening? What's happening here to me?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
I feel like I could ask you 1,000 more questions, but in the spirit of respecting your time and this and that, is there anything else that we haven't touched on, which I'm sure there's lots of stuff, but is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to talk about before we get to sharing your work and how people can support you?
That's a good question. No, actually not. I mean, I think maybe for the audience, I would love to invite people to, maybe that's it. Maybe I would love to invite people to really feel into their own systems. Oh, if they have lost touch with the sublime. And what I mean with that is magic.
Yes.
Philosopher Kant, Immanuel Kant, speaks about the sublime. So if you're interested in this word and why I'm saying that, definitely look into that. But and why I'm saying that is because, first of all, our allies who bring us into expanded states of consciousness have the quality of bringing us in connection to purpose and meaning and the sublime, and therefore magic. And I think that is, to me, something that is fundamentally missing in our society. And I think our meaning making is what we really, really need. And we need to touch back into these qualities of the sublime, of magic, of something that is awe, that has reverence. And one thing that we can all relate to, and has nothing to do with a religious format, there's nothing, this is a birthright to feel this. And that could be a sunset, that could be a storm, that could be, the laughter of a child where you get that feeling. For me, it really is a combination of the swaying of the trees with a specific breeze paired with the smell of the soil. That moment I'm walking, and as I'm speaking, I feel my whole nervous system is like I'm getting all goosebumps because I know exactly what that feeling is. And I walk with my eyes closed, and I'm in essential, intimate moment with nature, life. And that to me is awe. So I want to invite people to touch those moments more consciously. Because this is also where you tap into your authenticity and your sovereignty. And in a world where we are very much polarized, where we fed polarization, and whatever perspectives we all each have, we have a shared humanity. We have it. So touching back on magic and this part of life will bring a frequency and a resonance between you and the earth and your environment, even if it's just one moment a day.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I want to share and invite people in whatever that way would be for you. And, and feel that. Allow yourself to feel that, the busyness of everything that's happening in life.
Natasja, thank you. Thank you so much, honestly, for being here, for taking your time to be with us, for bringing your energy. I'm excited that you are going to be the first person that we share in 2025. It's like a beautiful, fresh start to the year. But how can people connect with you? How can people support you? How can people find you? We'll put everything in the show notes, of course, but how would you point people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so very easy. Where you find everything is my name, so Natasja Pelgrom, my Dutch last name, .com. But I will share that I have two platforms. One is Eudaimonia Institute, which is all about human flourishing and our online services. And if this is in January, we are starting a new online course for 5 weeks, Fundamentals of Space Holding, with an amazing cohort, our second cohort. And then the second platform services since 2017 above ground. So I want to share that. One of the first EU women launching a retreat, holistic retreat with a 6-week program. So so that's with, of course, our beautiful allies. And I only work with very small groups. And I went from providing more than 11 retreats a year to only 5, which one of them is a 9-day practitioner program in 2025. So I'm scaling down, I'm slowing down. And that's what I'm inviting you to do. I'm my biggest inviter to do myself.
I know. So, it's like practice what we preach.
Exactly.
The medicine told me that 5 years ago. Okay, thanks, Natasja, for the reminder.
Exactly.
It's okay, got it.
And then I have a beautiful platform that I'm really, really proud of. That's like a nonprofit, it's Stewards of the Sacred. It's a yearly online conference with a lot of speakers, and we contribute back in right relationship to different causes, different initiatives. It's a 3-day online conference from regenerative models to psychedelics to leadership qualities to space holding to earth-based wisdom and everything in between. So that's a little bit of a peek, but I would definitely invite people to come into Fundamentals of Space Holding and the practitioner program. And I want to say, because this is the thing, the question is most asked, my 9-day program, do I need to facilitate with plant medicine psychedelics? Absolutely not. This is not a training to teach you how to do that. This is for people that either have already experience or lifelong learners that want to deepen their own craft. And skillfully navigating expanded states, you need multiple journeys, with support. So that's my plug for today.
I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, we want to share you, so I love that you shared all that. Yeah, everybody listening, check it out for sure, obviously. But Natasja, thank you so much. You are just, I feel like I'm looking in a beautiful mirror, and I'm grateful for just getting to know you and getting to be in each other's world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.